future together, The Promise for a Better Australia by Dong Witham. Building a Stronger Future Together by Dong Witham. Promise for a Better Australia, Building a Stronger Future Together by Dong Witham. In this historic political address delivered by rally in Blacktown on November 13, 1972, Dong Witham, the Austrian Labour Party candidate, presented a visionary manifesto that represents the and the aspiration of the nation, with a fervent commitment to addressing societal disparities and embracing progressive change. Witham dives fiercely into the pressing challenges faced by Australia. Embracing a transformative approach, he outlined a comprehensive plan to tackle inequality, extend change, social justice, and expand opportunities for all. With the nation's eye upon him, Witham delivers a message that evaporates far beyond the rally ground, igniting a passionate call for a new Australia. A nation united, compassionate, and ready to embrace a brighter future for its citizens. As we revisit this powerful speech, we are invited to witness the birth of an era that shaped the course of Australian history, leaving an indelible mark on the collective consciousness of the nation. Source of the speech is the Millennium of Australian Democracy. Now to the speech by Dong Witham. Men and women of Australia, the decision we make for our country today on 2nd December is a choice between the past and present, between the demands and opportunities of the future. These are moments in history when whose fate and future of nations can be decided by a single decision. For Australia, this was a time for a new team, a new program, a new drive for equality and opportunities. It's time to create new opportunities for Australians. Time for a new vision of what we can achieve in this generation for our nation and the region of which we live. It's time for a new government, a new Labour government. My fellow citizens, I pursue this question to you. Do you believe that Australia can afford another 3 years like the last 20 months? Are you prepared to maintain at the head of your affairs as a coalition which has launched into crisis after crisis, embarrassment piled on embarrassment week after week? Will you accept another 3 years of waiting for next week crisis, next week blunders? Will you again entrust the nation's economy to the men who deliberately but needlessly created Australia's worst unemployment for 10 years? Or to the same men who have presided over the worst inflation for 20 years? Can you trust the last-minute promises of men who stood against this same proposal for 23 years? Would you trust your international affairs again to the men who gave you veteran? Will you trust your defenses to the men who haven't even given you F11? We have a new chance for our nation. We will recreate this nation. We have a new chance for our region. We will help recreate this region. The war of intervention in Vietnam is ending. The great people are rethinking and remolding their relationship and their obligations. Australia cannot stand as such a time. We cannot afford to live along with men whose attitudes are rooted in the slogans of 1950s, the slogans of fear and hatred. If we make such a mistake, we would make Australia a black water in our regime, in our region, and a black number in history. Australian Labour Party vindicated as we have been on great issues of the past. Stand ready to take Australia forward to its rightful, pride, secure and independent place in the future of our regime. And we are determined that the Australian people shall restore to their rightful place in their own country as participants, partners in government, as owners and keepers of the national estate and nation's resources, as fair and equal sharers in the wealth and opportunities that this nation should offer in abundance to all its people. We put Australians back into the business of running Australia and owning Australia. We will revive in this nation the spirit of national cooperation and national self-respect, mutual respect between government and the people. In 24 hours, Mr. Mahon will present to you a series of proposals purporting to be Liberal Party program. But it is not what they say in 24 hours that counts. It is what could have been done in the past 23 years. What has happened in the last 20 months on which the Liberals must be judged. It is the Liberal Party which asks you to take a leap in the dark. And the Liberal Party which disposes the elected Prime Minister in mid-term. The Liberal Party which has produced half-baked, uncosted proposal in its deathbed repentance. It is the Liberal Party whose election proposal are those which it denounced and derailed for 23 years. By contrast, the Australian Labour Party offers the Australian people the most carefully developed and consistent program ever placed before them. I am proud of our program, of our team. I am proud to be the leader of this team. I am proud that our program has made such achievement. Our program has three great aims. They are to promote equality, to involve the people of Australia in the decision-making process of our land, and to liberate the talent and uplift horizons of the Australian people. We want to give a new life and a new meaning to this new nation and to the touchstone of modern democracy, to liberty, equality, and fraternity. We propose a new chapter for children of Australia, the real answer to the modern malice of juvenile crime. Drugs and vandalism is not repression and moralism. The answer is to involve the creative energy of our children, our youth, in a creative and concerned community. We will not make preschool education available for every Australian. We do not just make We will make preschool education available for every Australian child. We do this not just because we believe that all Australian children should have the opportunities now available only to children in Canberra, but because preschool education is the most important single weapon of promoting equality and overcoming social, economic, language inequalities. Under the Labour government, Commonwealth spendings on schools and teachers will be the fastest expanding sector of budget expenditure. This must be done not just because of the basic resources of this nature is the skill of its people, but because education is the key for equality of opportunity. Sure, we can have education on the cheap, but our children will be paying for it for the rest of their lives. We will abolish fees at universities and colleges of advanced education. We believe that a student's merits rather than a parent's wealth should decide who should benefit from the community's vast financial commitment to tertiary education. And more, it's time to strike a blow for the idea that education should be free. Under the Liberals, this basic principle has been massively eroded. We will reassert that principle at the commanding height of education at the level of the university itself. We intend to raise the basic pension rate to 25% of average weekly earnings. Australia did that in the late 40s. Does anyone say we cannot afford it now? The important thing is that the present method of irregular, uneven, and politically instead pension increases has been a source of needless anxiety, insecurity, and indignity to those who depend on pension of their sole income. We will establish a universal health insurance system, not just because the Liberal system is grossly inadequate and inefficient, but because we reject a system in which the more one earns, the less one pays. A system by which a person on $20,000 a year pays only half as much as a person with $5,000 a year. We establish a national compensation scheme to reduce the hardship imposed by one of the great factors for inequality in society, inequality of law. We will involve the national government in a massive effort to rebuild our existing cities and build new ones. A deep and direct national involvement in Australia's cities will be the great trust of our government. It's not just because of 85% of our people live in cities and towns, but because the modern Australian social inequality is fixed upon families by the place in which they are forced to live, even more than by what they are able to earn. We make massive attack on the problem of land and housing cost. The land is the basic property of the Australian people. It is the people's land, and we will fight for the right of every Australian people to have access to it at fair prices. We give local governments full access to the loan council and grant commission, not only because the burden borne by taxpayer as rates paid must be reduced, but because the inequalities between regions must be attacked. By the national government acting with and through local government, rates are Australia's fastest growing forms of taxation. Only the national government has the resources to retard the growth of this burden on Australian homeowners. We revert our powers against prices. We establish a justification tribunal, not only because inflation will be the major economic problem facing Australia over the next 3 years, but because industrial cooperation and goodwill is becoming undermined by the conviction among employers that the prices of labor alone is subjected to, regulations and restraints. Under labor, the national government itself, the largest customer, will move directly and solidly into the field of consumer protection. We will change the emphasis in immigration from government recruiting to family reunion and to recruiting the migrants already there. The important thing is to stop the drift away from Australia. We believe that the Australian people, rather than government, should have the real say in the composition of the population. We will issue national development bonds through an expanded Australian Industry Development Corporation. And not just because we are determined to reverse the trend towards the foreign control of Australian resources, but because we want ordinary Australians to play their part in buying Australians back. We abolish conscription forthwith. It must be done not just because a volunteer or army means a better army, but because we profoundly believe that it is intolerable that a free nation at peace and under no threat should call by lottery. And the best of its use is to provide defense on the cheap. We will legislate to give Aborigines land rights. Not just because their case is beyond argument, but because all of us here, Australians, are diminished while the Aborigines are denied their rightful place in this nation. We will cooperate wholeheartedly with the New Guinea House Assembly in reaching successfully its timetable for self-government and independence. Not just because it is Australia's obligation to the United Nations, but because we believe it's wrong and unnatural that a nation like Australia should continue to run a colony. All of us as Australians have to insist that we can do so much better as a nation. We ought to be angry with a deep, determined anger that a country as rich and skilled as ours should be producing so much inequality, so much poverty, so much that is shabby and substandard. We ought to be angry with an unrelenting anger that our Aborigines have the world's largest infant mortality rate. We ought to be angry at the way our so-called leaders have kept us in the dark. Parliament itself, as much as the people, to hide their own capacity and ignorance. A key channel for communication between the Parliament and the people will be a number of expert commissions, making regular reports and recommendations on new spending. We will revive the Interstate Commission obtained in the Commission. We extend jurisdiction of the Commonwealth Grant Commission by established by statute in 1933. We will establish a Conversion and Construction Commission incorporating the Story Mountain Engineering Corporation and the River Murray Corporation, and the model of the University Commission and the Commission of the Advanced Education. We will establish a preschool commission, a school commission, a hospital commission, and a fuel and energy commission. These bodies will not merely be exercised in more efficient, more expert administration of public affairs, there will be an expression of our determination to keep the public informed and to keep the public involved in public debates on the great national affairs and the great national decisions. If Australia is ever to have decent schools and equal opportunity, if we are ever to have decent hospitals where they are needed, if we are ever to have decent cities and public transport, the national government must directly be involved. For too long, the federal system has been used as an alibi. Our national government is less involved in the national matters than the national government of any federal system. And yet, our national government has a greater share of the national finances and resources than any other federal government. In Australia, the federal government rates 77% of the public revenues in the United States, 64%, and in Canada and West Germany, 50%. My basic composition is this: that any basic service or function of our community which can inch to the star of the Commonwealth grows in equality and affluence. Any function or activity which Commonwealth grows in equality and any function or activity which is financially limited to the state will grow slowly or even decline. Further, a function will be fairly financed to the extent that the Commonwealth finds the money for it. A function will be fairly and inadequately financed if the whole burden falls upon the state. We want the Australian people to know the facts, to know the needs, to know the choices before them. We want them always to keep us as government to make the decisions and to make the right decisions. Australia has suffered heavily from the demeaning idea that the government always knows what the unspoken assumption, always in the background, that only the government knows or should know anything. Vietnam was only the most tragic result of that belief. The idea that the government must always know the best permitted the liberals to lie their way into that war. They could never have gotten away with it otherwise. Over the whole range of policy at home and abroad, this corrupting notion of a government monopoly of knowledge and wisdom has led to bad decisions and bad government. The Australian Labour Party will build into the administration of affairs, and to this nation machineries will prevent any government, Labour and Liberal, from ever again juggling your affairs under excessive and needless secrecy. Labour will trust the people. Economic planning. We shall give priority to public cooperation in setting up economic planning machineries with industries and employers. Representative to ensure strong and continued economic growth. Our program, particularly in education, welfare, hospitals, and cities, can only work successfully within a framework of strong, uninterrupted growth. Conservatively, the program will itself be the basis of strong growth. The whole period of Mahon government will be marked by the lowest rate of growth experienced in Australia since the 1930s and one of the lowest in the developed world. AI, a party 3% a year. The result has been the highest unemployment since 1961, and a needless loss of nearly $1 billion in lost production in the past year. Even the rate of growth aimed at in the last budget assumes unemployment of between 150,000 and 200,000 next year. 2 years of school leavers have suffered as a result. This year, 100,000 school leavers will either be unable to find jobs or be forced into jobs well below their skills. Qualifications and expectations. What stage has our country reached when it is regarded as a mark of success for government policies that the population of Australia has fallen for the first time since 1916? Labour's first priority would be to restore genuine full employment without qualification, without entering. This requires that the national government must by consultation and cooperation with all sectors of industry achieve a growth rate of 6% and 7%. In each of the next 3 years, leaders of the industry, employers and employees alike, are now united in their demands for the national government must plan the broad economic goals and targets for Australian economy. A Labour government will establish the machinery for continued consultation and economic planning to restore and maintain strong growth. This is the real answer to the patriot cry. Where is the money coming from? Even at the present low rate of growth, Commonwealth income has nearly doubled in the past 6 years. At existing rate of taxation, it would increase by 5,000 million in the next 3 years. It is because of the automatic and the inevitable massive growth in Commonwealth revenues that a whole range of Labour proposals denounced and derided by the Liberals for years and years have suddenly become possible and desirable on this election eve. Taxation. The huge and automatic increase in Commonwealth revenues ensures that rates of taxation need not be increased at any level to implement a Labour government program. The rates for which the wealthier section of the community, including companies, are liable are already high enough. The loss which the revenues suffer at this level is not because taxes are too low, but because tax avoidance are too easy. One legal tax avoidance scheme alone cost the revenue of at least $30 million last year. A Labour government will close the loopholes. To do this, we will set up a Parliament committee on taxation to expose the loopholes as fast as lawyer accountants discover them. We will expand the terms of reference of the ASPRI Committee on Taxations to include state and local government tax methods. The most pressing need in the tax field is to retard the trend by which inflation has forced lower and lower income earners into the high tax bracket. The Liberals have imposed huge silent tax increases by the simple expedient of leaving the tax schedule basically unexchanged since 1954. Inflation has done the rest, so that modest income earners of say $6,000 are being taxed at rates appropriate for every high income earners in 1954 standard. Our first step towards revisiting tax burden at the lower and middle level will be to require the Treasury to produce and publish forthwith the comprehensive revenue which Mr. Markham, as Treasurer, said in August 1969 would be urgently acted upon. Prices. The key to financing labor programs must be strong and continue economic growth based on sound national planning and national cooperation between government, employers, and employees. To obtain that cooperation, it is necessary to convince all sections of the community that responsibility, burdens, and opportunities are being shared equally by all sectors of the community. Employees as consumers must know that their national government requires equal cooperation from all powerful sectors of industry. Labor will protect the consumers, who will establish a price justification tribunal. We will establish a parliamentary standing committee to review prices in key sectors. We will strengthen the laws against restrictive trade practices. A labor government will not hesitate to use its powers as customers. And those tariff subsidies and contracts to prevent unjustifiable price rises, the greatest consumer and most powerful consumer in Australia is the Commonwealth itself. We expand the activities of the Defence Standard Laboratories and Commonwealth Analysis, and the CSIRO to provide a national consumer standard laboratory to conduct its own testing of food and other goods of importance to community welfare and well-being. These results will be published. We will allow the Commonwealth Bank to join all other banks in affording higher purchase services. Education. Please let me cover the black curtain. It is our basic proposition that the people are entitled to know. It is our basic belief that people will respond to national needs once they know those needs. It is in education, the need of our people, that we will give prime expressions to the proposition and that belief. Schools. The most rapidly growing sector of public spending under a Labour government will be education. Education should be the great instrument for promoting of equality. Under the Liberals, it has become a weapon of perpetrating inequality and promoting privilege. For example, the pupils of state and Catholic schools have had less than half as good an opportunity as pupils of non-Catholic independent schools to gain Commonwealth country, to get Commonwealth secondary scholarship, and are very much less than half of the opportunity of completing other secondary education. The Labour Party is determined that every child who embarks on secondary education in 1973 shall, irrespective of school location, have as good an opportunity as any other child of completing his secondary school education and continuing his education further. The Labour Party believes that the Commonwealth should give most assistance to schools, primary and secondary, whose pupils need most assistance. Education is the prime example of a community service. Education is a prime example of a community service which should involve the entire community, not just the education department and the Catholic school authorities and the Headmasters Conference. Not just parents and teachers, but taxpayers as a whole. The equality of community response to the need and the educational system will determine the quality of system. But the community must first know and understand the need. We reject the proposition that administrative convenience should override the real needs of schools. We reject the argument that well-endowed schools should get as much help from Commonwealth as the poorest state or parish schools, just because it is easier to count health than to measure needs. The Australian Labour Party believes that the Commonwealth should adopt the same method to assist schools as it has adopted to assist universities and colleges to advance education through a commission. We will establish an Australian School Commission to examine and determine the needs of students in government and non-government primary, secondary, and technical schools. I propose to prepare for Universities Commission. In December 1956, he wrote to Sir Kelt Murray and some other leading educationalists to advise him on the immediate need of universities in their future requirements. They reported to Sir Robert within 9 months, "I shall write before Christmas to a small group of leading educationalists, including representatives of the state and Catholic system. I shall write in precisely same terms as Sir Robert, requesting for all schools, as he did for universities, recommendations upon their financial needs and appropriate means of providing this need." The greatest single aim is removing and modifying the inequalities of background, environment, family, income, or family nationality. In the case of migrant children, or race, in the case of Aborigines. Will be the provision of preschool education in Canberra, where Commonwealth cannot escape responsibility. Every child enjoys a year at properly equipped and properly staffed preschool centers. In the state, less than 20% of children do, for an annual cost of 40%, for an annual cost of 40 million, which would take about 6 years to attain. We could provide every Australian child with the opportunity, a means of equalizing and enriching every child's life for the rest of his life, now enjoyed fully by children of Canberra. To administer this program of national enrichment and national equality, we will establish a preschool commission. The issue is not only education, it is part of the fundamental issue of equality. Health. The most notorious single instance of unequal sharing of burden is the laborers' health insurance system. I personally find it quite unacceptable that a system whereby a man who drives my Commonwealth car in Sydney pays twice as much as the same family cover as I have. Not despite the fact that my income is 4 or 5 times higher than his, but precisely because of my higher income. Health insurance. A federal Labour government will introduce a universal health insurance scheme. It will administer a single health fund. Contributors will be paid according to taxable income. An estimated 35,000 Australian families will pay nothing. 4 out of 5 will pay less, than their contributors to the existing scheme. Hospital care will be paid for completely by the funds on whatever wards the patient doctor advises. The fund will pay the full cost of the medical treatment if doctor chose to bill the fund directly, or refund 85% of the fees if the patient pays these fees himself. Our health insurance scheme has been carefully developed, analyzed, and costed over a period of nearly 6 years. It embraced the chief recommendation of the NIMO report and the State Select Committee on Medical and Hospital Costs. I note that the latest complaint from the Australian Medical Association is that its details have been reversed 3 times in the last 5 years. At least, that's 2 times fewer than doctors have raised their fee. In staffing the health insurance fund, employment preference will be given to employees of present private funds who will enjoy the entitlement status and conditions and terms of employment accorded to Commonwealth public servants. Hospitals. Health insurance is only one aspect of health proposal, and in fact is not the most important. Health is a community affair. Communities must look beyond the person who is sick in bed or who needs medical attention. Each of us needs continual health services, beginning with birth and lasting throughout our lives. The Labour government will set up an Australian Hospital Commission to promote the modernisation and regionalisation of hospitals. The Commission will be concerned with more than just hospital services. Its concern and financial support will extend to the development of the community. These services will call for the employment of increasing numbers of salaried doctors. The Commission will be concerned with more than just hospital services. Its concern and financial support will extend to the development of communities-based health services and sponsoring of preventive health programs. We will sponsor public nursing homes. We will develop community health clinics. These services will call for the employment of increasing numbers of salaried doctors. We will emphasize that from restricting the choice of doctors or patients, our proposals will be widen them and will in fact provide a new avenue of employment and community service. Let me emphasize that far from restricting the choice of doctors or patients, our proposal will widen them and will in fact provide a new avenue of employment and community service to the members of the great medical profession. Dental health. We will introduce a 5-year program to provide free dental services to all Australian school children. The basis of the program will be training of dental therapists to practice under the supervision of qualified dentists It will provide grants to the state to enable them to build and staff colleges to train the therapists. The Federal Vice President and the Australian Dentists Association has hailed this proposal as a very important first step in preventive dentistry. Social welfare. Just as we propose to bring total community approach to nation's health, we will revolutionize the community approach to the problems of welfare, particularly the problems of the aged, the sick, the handicapped, the retired, and the migrants. The great weakness in Australian social welfare is that we rely almost only on provision of cash benefit. Australians should no longer tolerate the view that once government have decided to level off cash payments, the community has discharged its obligations to those who depend upon the community for their sole or main income of sustenance. Welfare services. We will establish an Australian assistance plan with the emphasis of providing social workers to provide advice, counsel, and above all, steer human contact that the underprivileged in our society, in our community so desperately need. And all too often so desperately lacks. Australian welfare services are now badly fragmented between different authorities. Australia urgently needs national development and national coordination of the service of various agencies. Australian welfare services are now badly fragmented between different authorities. Australian urgently need national development and national coordination of the services of various agencies provide. It is not only the manifestly poor or handicapped who have welfare needs, bereavement, temporary incapacity, loss of breadwinner of the homemaker can strand any family at any time. Australian assistance plan will provide the basis of cost sharing with local authorities and voluntary agencies over a wide range of welfare services in each locality. The overriding aim will be to expand and enhance, coordinate, yet diversify the activities of welfare agencies, both government and voluntary, Australia needs more social workers and we set out to provide them. Yet Australia also needs an entirely new approach to the question of cash payment themselves. The other approach is threefold. We will raise the payment pension rate to 0x level of averagely of average weekly earnings. We abolish means test and we establish national superannuation pension rate. The basic rates will no longer be tied to the financial and political consideration of annual budget. All pensions will be immediately raised by $1.5. And thereafter, every spring and every autumn, the basic petition rate will be raised by $1.5 until it reaches 25% of average weekly meal earnings. It will never be allowed to fall like that. The basic compensation payment under the Repatriation Act will be given as fixed relationship with the Commonwealth minimum wage, so that the special CPI rate equals the minimum wage and general 100% rate petition equals 50% of minimum wage and other petition rate and our allowance as adjusted proportionally. National superannuation. National superannuation will be established by a thorough jury into the overseas affairs and Australian proposal of such a scheme. And allowances are adjusted proportionately. National superannuation. National superannuation will be established after thorough inquiry into overseas examples and an Australian proposal of such a scheme. In the dying hours of the last parliament, the overriding aim will be to expand and enhance, coordinate, yet diversify the attention of the welfare agencies. National superannuation will be established after a thorough inquiry into the overseas examples and Australian proposal of such a scheme. In the dying hours of the last parliament, Mr. Mark Moore announced the appointment of a committee headed by Sir Leslie to inquire into the possibility of national superannuation. We will appoint a committee to recommend a scheme of national superannuation. The inquiry will have one of its terms of reference, the protection of the entitlement under an existing superannuation scheme, to ensure that no one who is contributing or has contributed to such scheme is disadvantaged by introducing a national scheme. Mean test. The means test will be abolished within the life of the next parliament. Overseas petition. All Australian residents who have gained the right to receive an Australian social service will continue to enjoy that right wherever they choose to live. This concerns principally aged, invalid, or widowed migrants who choose to return home, but it will apply to all Australians. It do not depend on the negotiation of reciprocal agreement with other countries or a 20-year-old resident in Australia. Cities. Even the most enlightened and equal approach of social welfare can only scratch the surface of the burden of the basic problem of equality and well-being of most of our citizens. We can double and triple social benefits, but we can never make up through cash payments for what we take away in mental, physical well-being and social cohesion through breakdown of community lives and community identity. We can double and triple social benefits, but we can never make up for cash payments for which we take away in mental and physical well-being and social cohesion through the breakdown of community life and community identity. Whatever benefits employees may secure through negotiation or arbitration will be immediately eroded by the cost of living in their cities. No amount of wealth redistribution through higher wages or lower prices can really offset the inequalities imposed by the physical nature of the cities. Increasingly, a citizen reach standard of living, the health of himself and his family, his children opportunities for education and self-improvement, his access to employment opportunities, his ability to enjoy a nation's resources for recreation or culture, his ability to participate in decisions and actions of the community are determined by his income, not by the hours he works, but by where he lives. This is why the Labour believes that the national government must involve itself directly in cities. Practically, every major national problem relates to cities. A national government will cut itself off from responsibility for the nation, which cuts itself off from responsibility for the nation's cities in cutting itself off the nation's real life. National government, which has nothing to say about cities, has nothing relevant or enduring to say about the nation or the nation's future. Labour is not a city-based party, it is a people-based party. And the overwhelming majority of our people live in cities and towns across our nation. We shall cooperate with the state, local government and semi-government authorities in a major effort to reduce land and housing costs and retard rises in rates and local government charges. Urban Ministry. We will establish a new Ministry of Urban Affairs to analyze research, coordinate plans for each city and region, and to analyze and to advise the federal government on grants for urban purposes. The burden of house owners has been increased in 4 ways. AI, the cost of land, cost of building, the cost of money and rates, partly as a result of this growing burden, under the Mahon government and percentage of Australians owning their own homes has declined for the first time since 1980. Land. The land is a nation's basic resources. A home is usually the largest investment which a family ever makes. It is an investment which most families have to make. A Labour government will have two overriding objectives: to make Australian families access to land and housing at fair prices, and to preserve and enhance the quality of national estate, of which land is very foundational. We set up a Commonwealth Land Development Commission in each state to buy substantial tracts of land and keep new areas being opened in our housing. We will set up a Commonwealth State Land Development Commission in each state to buy substantial tracts of land in new areas being opened out for housing and to lease or sell at cost fully serviced housing block, as in Canberra until 2 years ago. In Southern, the average cost of land and dwelling at present is between $22,000 and $23,000. While land prices vary from city to city and state to state. The leap in land prices in Sweden is an indication that what will happen in every Australian city if the national government fails to act. Spiraling land costs are depriving young people of any opportunity to acquire their own home. There are 900 families in housing commission waiting list throughout Australia. 40,000 families are registered in the New South Wales Housing Commission are in Southern alone. The Commonwealth government, in cooperation with states and local governments, will acquire land in the new areas of capitals and centres. The Commonwealth government, in cooperation with states and local governments, will acquire land in the new areas of capitals, centres and country towns. We will diversify the method of various land tenure to cater for needs. We will diversify the methods of land tenure to cater for the needs and wishes of all sections and income levels of the community. The model of the land tenure system would be land policy applied by successive governments. In Canberra before January 1971, before then, land prices in Canberra were the most suitable in Australia. With the doctrine destruction of that system, Canberra land prices have tripled and quadrupled. With the doctrine destruction of that system, Canberra land prices have tripled and quadrupled. Newly acquired land will be allocated already to need by ballot. The only payment would be an annual land rental. With the doctrine destruction of that system, Canberra land prices have tripled and quadrupled. Newly acquired land will be allocated according to the need by ballot. The only payment would be an annual land rental. A limited number of subdivisions will be auctioned or leased out of freehold. The Land Development Commission will also acquire land for national parks, land in which historic buildings or buildings specifically worth of preservation are sited. Land along the coastline where the people access to their beaches is endangered. Land in other areas needed special protection. Land in other areas needed special protection, such as Blue Mountains. When possible, land of national importance will be handed over with proper safeguards to state government. Local authorities and national trust conservation groups and other such bodies whose purposes are consistent in the Land Development Commission. The National Trust Conservation Group and other such bodies whose purposes are consistent with the Land Development Commission we will vigorously campaign for the planting of more trees, nature's air conditioners, and the city's lungs. Building cost. 8 years ago, Sir Albert's journey proved that the cost of building the average house could be reduced by 8%. If building and lending authority regulations are unified, and the cost of developing the average site could be reduced by 20%, if requirements of reticulations of service are standardized in those 8 years of Commonwealth and states have not been enacted the Uniform Code, Sir Albert's calculations are still valid. We will delay no longer. 4 methods have been proposed to counter the rising cost of housing loans: to capitalize child endowment, to liberalize home savings grant, to subsidize interest payment, or to make interest tax deductible. Loans for war service homes, for which the Commonwealth cannot escape responsibility, still carry the pre-liberal interest rate. Every institutional lender has, under the Liberals, increased its interest rate by 3% or 3.5%. homeowners now have to pay much more in interest payments than capital repayment. The liberals have not been willing to act to reduce interest rates when economic conditions would have allowed. Labour will deliberately plan to reduce interest rates whenever practicable. Meanwhile, we propose that a limited 10 tax deductibility be available for interest payments. The tax correction will be concentrated among the groups which bear the greatest burden. All taxpayers whose actual income is 4,000 or below will be entitled to deduct 100% of their interest rate payment. The percentage of total interest payment which is deductible will be reduced by 10% for every $100 of income in excess of 4,000. Since the Liberals amended the original Commonwealth State Housing Agreement, the proportion of total housing built per year by state authorities has halved. Over the last year and a half, as escalating land prices forced more young people into housing authorities' waiting lists, there has been an alarming decline in the state housing activity. The authorities cannot purchase sufficient land at the new prices. Particularly in New South Wales. The inability to provide housing or those who need it most threatens to reach crisis proportion. A Labour government will request each state authority to estimate the funds it will require to reduce the period of houses in 12 months. We will encourage life insurance funds to re-enter the housing field. World Service Homes. We will enable the Commonwealth Bank and the World Service Home Division to lend up to 100% of the value of properties against which their advances are made. The World Service Home Division will establish a revolving fund of housing finance for the use not only for all returned servicemen, but of all servicemen who henceforth earn an honorable discharge. We will all remove the Marxist government 1951 and 1961. Restrictions to World Service Home. Australians pay some of the world's highest rates for some of the world's worst municipal services. The service is a Commonwealth refusal to assist local government and states failure to speak up for their own creation. The result has been steeply increased rates and charges, growing inequalities between regions and growing indebtedness. Grants Commission. We will require the Commonwealth Grants Commission to provide equality between regions as it has traditionally promoted equality between states. We will amend the Commonwealth Grants Commission Act to authorize the Commission to inquire into and report other applications of Commonwealth. The Commission will determine the amount of Commonwealth Help Fund necessity at a standard not appropriately below that of other authorities or groups of authorities. See whereas A Labour government will immediately ask the principal water and sewage authorities which Commonwealth grant the present financial year would enable them to embark promptly and economically on uninterrupted programs to serve services to all premises in their areas by 1978. For subsequent financial years, the Commonwealth Grants Commission will investigate and recommend signs of Commonwealth grants required to the program through Loan Council. Let there be no mistake among Labour determination to make government a genuine partner in the federal system. As next year's constitutional convention will make direct representation of local government in condition of the Commonwealth participation. In 1927, when the first financial agreement between the Commonwealth and State established the Loan Council, semi and local government debts were a mere fraction of state debt. Now, semi and local government authorities have to find a large sum as the state government for the repayment of loans and payment of interest. It would be conceivable if the financial agreement were being drawn up now for these authorities to be completely ignored. At present, in the Loan Council, each state has one vote and one Commonwealth. 2 votes and a casting vote. We propose that at next year's convention, the loan will be restructured to consist of one representative from each state government, one representative of the aldermen and councillors in each state chosen by them, and 4 representatives of the Commonwealth. It will be possible for the Commonwealth on request to raise approved loans on behalf of semi-local government, thus giving them the advantage of the longer period and lower interest appertaining to the loans raised by the Commonwealth on behalf of the state. Urban transportation. After land and housing, there is a third basic element of the city. It is transport. Australia must overcome the drowning of the motor car or face the destruction of its major cities as decent centers of our culture, our community, our civilization. The national government must now accept a share of responsibility for the public transport system of Australian cities. It must accept the offers of the New South Wales and Victorian premiers for a transfer of their state railways system and accept such an offer from any other state. In no other federal system in the world are railways conducted by state government or within state compartments. For many years, the Commonwealth has provided funds for new railways between the state capitals. AIR is now receiving repayment of $10 million a year from these outlays. Australia and for years have been made outright ground for freeways within the capitals, despite the pleas of all state transport ministries and advice of its own Bureau of Transport Economics. The Commonwealth has refused to spend a cent on railways within the state capital. Many of the Sydney and Melbourne suburbs, which have grown most rapidly since the war, are still serviced by single-track pre-war railway lines. The land, earthworks, platforms, and stations are available to build a second track without delay. The busiest suburban lines have to share their tracks with country trains and good trains. The land is available to lay an additional commuter track to be used by express trains in one direction in the morning peak hour and the other in the afternoon peak hour. The Commonwealth must now promptly act as the federal government for years past have acted in the United States, Canada, West Germany, and ensure that rolling stock signals and track provide an efficient and economic alternative transport service in the cities. Our urban transport system are a social asset as well as an economic asset. In planning their use, we must consider not only the economic return but the social return. The costly vehicles which are needed for peak hour traffic should not stand idle at other times because economic fears are beyond the pocket of potential passengers. A Labour government will grant the urban public transport authorities a condition that will provide free off-peak travel. This subsidy will be paid at a rate of 83 per annum per head of population in the 6 state centers and in the provincial centers which provided public transport. The return in our outlay, an estimated 626 million per year, will be in great sense not only for accelerated modernization programs but in terms of human happiness for those who enables for the first visit shop, theaters, museums and other urban resources without the petty worry and fear. Interstate transport. The Interstate Commission was intended to end the specialization fostered by all state governments through their railway system. It must now provide not only the coordination of 6 mainland railways and a major part in the period before the Commonwealth. Like other federal governments, inevitably takes responsibility of railways and ports. It is also the ideal instrument for coordinating our major roads and shipping lines and airlines and pipelines. It is shameful that there is still only one single track railway between Joni and Habio, and such a grossly inadequate highway between Cabra and Albert. It is a scandal that liberal governments have suppressed the reports of the risks of roads and transport economics. A federal Labour government will promptly restore the machinery of constitution intended and vat it with Commonwealth full constitutional powers to plan and provide modern means of communication within the state. Regional development. We will stand ready to cooperate with the states in supporting the regional development plan they have already announced. 3 state governments, NSY, Victoria, and South Australia have already selected areas for concentrated and accelerated development. Unlike our opponents in Canberra, we acknowledge the foresight and indeed political courage of those governments in naming specific areas, in counting the inevitable disappointment and even resentment of those areas not mentioned. We are to face the fact that if we were called, none has been chosen. The greatest enemy of the regional development in Australia has been rivalry between the states and the jealousy between centers within the state. Telephone charges. Our first step for state programs will be to implement all state the recommendation of Victorian Decentralization Committee that centers nominated for accelerated development be recognized for telephone charging purposes as an extension of the metropolitan areas. Thereby, renters should be equivalent and falls between these places and capital charge as for local cost. In our first time in office, we will concentrate our initiative and endeavors on two areas. Albury Wodonga and Townsville. At Albury Wodonga, the Commonwealth has the constitutional jurisdiction and administrative power to establish another inland city. It is the size of Canberra. The Commonwealth are responsible for decisions which have determined the growth and the burden of Townsville more than any Australian city except Canberra itself. Besides Christmas, the new Minister of Urban Affairs, Mr. Tom Erie, and I took a meeting with the Premier of Victoria and NSW at Abbey to initiate a program for the development of the two cities. On the back of the Murray for too long a symbol to separate rather than link Australia two great sisters, they will initiate a new era of Commonwealth and state government cooperation for the building of new cities throughout Australia. I am convinced that our determination to make success of building a new inland city in Australia will have a tremendous effect on lifting the morale and all our faithful citizens whose families have lived and whose hope are laid upon generation. Away from the great coastal capital, let it be a symbol of a great factor on national life. Australia, the independence between city and country. Primary industry. The consistent failure of the Liberia Country Party government to provide forward-thinking and positive leadership has resulted in politically expedient confidence to major sector of the rural industry along Australia. The failure of the government to tackle the mounting problem caused by changes in national trade policies, unfair freight rates imposed by overseas shipping companies, and inflation throughout Australia has resulted in breakdown of economic viability. The Labour government will ensure economic viability of primary industry. with the emphasis of financial stability, security, and confidence in the people. Rural finance. Fundamental to labor policies on resource development. The constitution and rehabilitation of rural industry and rural workforce is the ready availability of long-term low-interest finance. Rural financing will be carried out effectively through the present banking system and by an expansion of functions of the development bank. Disaster. Labour believes that the crippling effect of disaster like drought, floods, Australian land, and cyclones must be minimized. We shall establish a national disaster organization to handle this crisis with speed and efficiency. Water conservation of water has always been an integral part of labour development policy that affects primary industry. Australia water needs underline the growing independence between city and country. The proper use of Murray doing system is the vital element of the Ross River and the Burkin project are a vital Townsville to the Townsville Excellence. There will be prime responsibility of the Conservation and Construction Authority, which will be financed from the $47 billion which Victoria and South Wales will pay each year for the next 50 years for the Snowy Mountain scheme, and which will discharge the full range of common responsibility recommended by the Senate Committee on Water Pollution. Labour's policy is firmly mounted on the need for a continued project of soundly based, reliable, and small-scale water economic projects. Our priorities for water conservation in the rural areas will be concentrated in the proven established areas where absence of conserved water is serious limiting. Factors to stability and growth. This implies particularly in those areas which are highly susceptible to recurring drought and where millions of acre-feet of water flow wastefully in the sea. The Labour government will authorize a flexibility study for storing the periodic surplus of wheat in strategically located places which are periodically devastated by drought. At the same time, this emergency storage will be used to keep advantage of periodic storage. Wood. The Labour recognizes the tremendous contribution which wood makes to the national economy. The wood corporation will be empowered to acquire or market the Australian wool chip. Labour rural policies are founded on orderly marketing, stabilization, and progressive reconstruction. The Labour government will strive to expand economic stability to every primary industry and rural region. The Labour government will accelerate the afforestation and development of forest resources with due regard to environmental factors. The great fishing resources of Australian coastal waters has been rejected by the Liberal country party here. We initiate public resources survey for fishing potential, and we assist in the provision of fishing vessels and processing facilities. Wine. The wine exercise tax will be abolished. Northern development. The Labour objective is to develop the vast, valuable resource of Northern Australia for the benefit of the Australian motive and future Australians. The Labour government will establish a Ministry of Northern Development. It is in the north that agri sugar and cattle industry have been established, and it is in the north that Australians face the greatest challenge to retain the ownership of the nation's resources. It is the north that the Australians face greatest challenge to retain the ownership of nation's resources and base new industry on those resources. We applaud the vision and vigor shown by the Western Australian Labour government in drawing up plans for the development of the Bibarian region. The federal Labour government will cooperate with the Western Australian government in the project, for it is truly national scope and significant. It shall be an objective of the Labour government that is an unquestionable share of Australian trade shall be carried on Australia-owned and Australian-managed ships. The future development of Australian shipping will be through expansion into the overseas trade, especially bulk cargoes. To enable a smooth transition into overseas shipping, a Labour government will establish a joint shipping venture between the ANL and private Australian shippers. The Liberal experiment of making the ANL a minor partner in foreign conferences has cost this country dear. Shipping. It shall be an objective of the Labour government that an equitable share of Australian trade shall be carried in Australian-owned and Australian-managed ships. Future development of Australian shipping will be thorough expansion into the overseas trade, especially bulk cargoes, to enable a smooth transition into overseas shipping. A Labour government will establish a joint shipping venture through the ANL and the private Australian ship owners. The Liberal experiment of making the ANL a major partner in foreign conferences has cost the country dear. We will ensure that the ANL fulfills its proper role as cost this country dear. We will ensure that the ANN fulfills its proper role as the Tasmanian and Darwin lifeline to encourage further maritime employment and shipbuilding activities. The Labour government to introduce a system of finance for ship construction along the lines of the Japanese government import-export bank operation to enable ship owners to avoid extensive capital outlays before the ship becomes fully earning. To avoid this long-term financing becoming a burden to the Reserve Bank, the private bankers' own bank, the Australian Resources Development Bank, will be encouraged to fund ship construction under Commonwealth guarantee. Rural industries will no longer hold the dominating position in Australian export trade that they once did, but they will have traditionally and overwhelmingly the industries with Australians have controlled industries from which Australia or Australians have derived the benefit and profits and industries of Australians, all Australians, have shared the burden in the times of hardship and difficulty. Now the most profitable and significant Australia industry and resources are under foreign control. Sir John Irwin described the process as selling bits of farm year by year to pay our way. Mr. Mark Mount, more than any other Libra, prevented any effort to limit foreign investment in those years. More than any other Australian, Mr. McMahon bears responsibility for Australians selling the farm. But in truth, it has not been the farm which has been sold, but industries like wheat, wool, or fruit, or dairy, or gold industries which have faced crisis and hardship of recent years. It is the strongest and the richest of our own industries and services which have been bought up from overseas. It's time to stop the great overtake of Australia. But more important, it's time to start buying Australia back. The Labour government will enable Australia and ordinary Australians to take part in the ownership, development, and use of Australian industry and resources. The protection of Australian enterprises against cover and only be achieved by explicit government policies. We will establish secretariats to report to the government on all matters concerning the occur of foreign investment and any substantial drugs. Restrict about 2% of the Australian drugs. Australia, why the cost of 90% of drugs sold in Australia are provided by the taxpayer. We expand the activities of Australian Industrial Development Corporation to enable it to join the Australian foreign companies in the exploration, development, and processing of the Australian resources. Insurance funds. Australia capital will be effectively mobilized through the issue of national development bonds and by encouraging Australian insurance companies to invest in approved development projects. We guarantee the insurance company Australia's largest reserve of private capital against diminished returns in following approved investment policy. A Labour government will set this fundamental goal for Australian industry that Australia shall build a basic requirement of rolling stock, pipeline, ships and light fighter craft in Australia. The Australian development and the ownership of the Australian resources must confine all of us, Australians. It's not a matter of the businessman or the directors or investors. It is a direct concern of the overwhelming majority of the Australian workforce. That is 9% of the workforce who are employees. Unless Australia reasserts a greater measure to control over their own industry resources, they will find opportunities within their own countries close to them, and salaried executives will be more adversely affected than industrial workers, because the upper aliens of management are the most attractive reward opportunities in research. Development decision making will be close to them. Australia's most profitable, important and fast-growing industries are already in foreign hands. The companies which control them are more and more multinational corporations whose resources are as large as those whose national governments are larger than any of our own state governments. Yet, we have had this year pinnacle of an Australian leader, the Deputy Prime Minister of Australia himself, calling upon these foreign corporations to use their immense muscle power to resist the palm of their own legislative Australian employees, Petro. The July petrol strike was the first test of this anti-Australian doctrine. When an Australian government collaborated with the representative of some of the latest foreign cartels in the world to prolong a strike in the hope of provoking the disruption of the political advantage of the liberals and the economic advantage of the oil cartel, conspiracy are tweeted, not at least because an Australian company will not go along. When the statutory experience in mind, a Labour government will give a lead to maximizing Australian ownership and control of great industry by ensuring that where price, availability and accessibility are good, the Commonwealth will make its purchases from Australia-owned and controlled labour or trade companies. Labour will buy Australia. The strength of the multinational corporation in the Australian economy requires strong unions as well as strong government to deal with them. The Labour government will facilitate the amalgamation of the Australian Trade Union, the most enlightened Australian employee as welcome of amalgamation. So would any prouded and patriotic Australian government. The great aims of the Labour industrial policy will be to reduce government interference and intervention in industrial matters, to put conciliation back into arbitration, to abolish penal clauses which make strikes in Australia alone in English-speaking world a criminal offence, restraining a great and growing cause of industrial unrest. A great and growing cause of industrial unrest is a sense of insecurity arising from the technological changes in white-collar employment, such as industrial employment, economic mismanagement of the Marmon interregnum has highlighted the structural imbalance of industry which is creating a hardcore pool of skilled but unwanted employees. The Labour government, in consultation with the employer and employee organization, will pursue schemes of training and retraining, including audit apprenticing, to equip employees with skills or age will prevent them from obtaining any suitable employment to occupy any position within the same industry, or in the cases of redundancy, to obtain employment in some other industry. There should be no limitation of appropriate training and retraining. We will use our constitutional powers to ensure recognition of overseas trade and professional qualification. Negotiated agreement. Mr. Malcolm Moore has declared against industrial agreement through reconciliation and negotiation. In doing so, he has also declared for a policy of confrontation. He has turned against the section of the employees who most upon depend upon negotiation of their earnings and their conditions. The white collar, the trained, and the professional employees, 80% of all agreements are reached not through the court, but through negotiation. The more likely qualified, the more highly qualified an Australian is, the more likely it is that it is an employee. %80 of all agreements was reached not through the court but through negotiation. The more likely qualified an Australian is, the more likely it is that he will be an employee. The more highly qualified he is, the more likely it is that he enjoys negotiated agreement. For liberals who insist that awards must be made solely by court, is a declaration of war, not just on industrial actions, industrial unions, but on unwavering majorities of professional and salary employees. Commonwealth's public service. The largest group of such employees are Commonwealth-owned employees with no conscience that most industrial unrest occur among government services, because Australian government are among Australian worst employers. It is no coincidence that the most industrial unrest occur during government employees. In the three eastern mainlands, where the government in Canberra abets the three Liberal Country Party, where the government in Canberra upsets the three Liberal Country Party in their policies for antagonism towards their own employees. Australia's largest employer, the Post Office, will be severed from the control of the Public Service Board. For our own employees, we applied ILO Maternity Protection Convention going back in 1919, which guarantees women leave with full pay and benefits for 6 weeks before and 6 weeks after confinement. We will explore employment opportunities for women who wish to work part-time while their children are at school. We will explore employment opportunities for women who wish to work part-time while their children are at school. We will apply the principle of equal pay to our own employees and fully support the equal pay case before the Consolidation and Arbitration Commission. All Commonwealth employees will receive 4 weeks annual leave. In the lifetime of the 28th Parliament, this week working hours will be reduced by 1.25 hours to 35 hours. Quality of life. There is no greater social problem facing Australia than the good use of expanding leisure. It is a problem of all modern and wealthy communities. It is above all the problem of urban societies and thus, in Australia, the most urbanized nation on earth, a problem more pressing for us than for any other nation on earth. A problem more pressing for us than any other nation on earth. For such a nation as ours, this may very well be the problem of the 1980s. So we must prepare now, prepare the generation of the 80s, children and youth of the 70s, to be able to enjoy and enrich their growing hours of leisure. Community centers. One of the major concerns of many families today is the well-being, both physical and mental. Of young children. The highest is in new areas of both parents are working, leaving children unattended for long periods after school. Figures on the growing increase in juvenile crime, in drug taking among youth on physical fitness show there is real ground for concern. Labour will establish within each community a community center. Labour will establish within each community a community center, a focal point for both the young and the old, for children and parents. Approximately, this focal point will be the school. We shall make a series of, I'm going on break soon. We shall make a series of special capital grants for the establishment of land multipurpose centers at schools. We shall make a series of special grants for the establishment of large multipurpose centers at school. During the day, the centers will be used as assembly halls or for other school activities, educational or sporting. In other school hours, the building could be used for adult education or for useful cultural artistic activities. Dancing, art, dancing, sport, photography, etc. by all members of the community. Skills would be proved useful in the later life, would be gained in an atmosphere which is mostly recreational. The Commonwealth is presently financing the building of science blocks and libraries because industry demands better trained labor to meet modern demands. The labor plan will be to improve people for their role, not just in industry but in society. The scheme will start with secondary school, but in larger areas, it hopefully could in the future be extended wherever necessary to primary schools. The scheme will operate in conjunction with the youth leadership course as it does successfully in Canada, where people with an empathy with youth are carefully chosen to help develop skills of young people and sporting, recreational, of cultural activities which would take place in school in after school hours. Youth leaders like preschool teachers, dental therapists, social workers are scarce. Youth leaders like preschool teachers, dental therapists, and social workers are scarce. It will take 3 years to commence producing them in sufficient numbers. It will make a start. The Labour Party will also develop a cost-sharing formula to develop improved sporting facilities at school. As the multipurpose, the Labour Party will also develop a cost-sharing formula to develop improved sporting facilities at school. As with the multipurpose building, this will be available for community use in after-school and principally the facilities will be taking field and swimming pools. At present, an enormous amount of capital is poured into this facility in these schools which have them. The facilities, however, are used for only a small portion of each day, not at all at weekends and when they are used. They are used by only a small portion of the community, hence by those actually attending school. School themselves will, of course, have first call its facility, but the whole community will benefit from their usage outside school hours. The school will become a focal center for community living. Initially, development of this program will be a joint responsibility of the Department of Urban Affairs, Education and Health and Welfare. Tourism. The quality of accessible and cheapness of Australian leisure will be incomparable in the world. Should be incomparable in the world. The tourist industry is one of Australia's largest sources of overseas income and regional employment. It will make grants, loans, tax, insurance, and other investment. As recommendation by the Australian Tourist Commission to ensure that Australian cities and tourist centres are provided with accommodation and amenities for international standards. Following the early stage of the terrestrial, sea and continental shelf bill, we will declare the Great Barrier Reef a national park. Townsville, the Great Way to the Reef, will be made an international airport. We will set up an international park service to admire national parks in the ACT and the Northern Territory. We would also work in cooperation with the New Southern Wales and Victorian government of the National Park of the Australian Aims, and with the New South Wales and South Australian government to develop a Central Australian wilderness area. We will encourage Australian Airlines to provide as cheap holidays within the Australian and Australian Overseas Airline has been able to do for overseas travel. We will set the Australia Tourism Commission with the Commonwealth's full constitutional power to engage in business activity appropriate tourism, such as licensing of overseas and interstate travel agents. Arts and media. Our objective for Australian arts are to promote the standard of excellence in the arts, to widen access to and understanding the application of art the art in community generally to establish and express an Australian identity. Thus, the art to promote awareness of Australian culture abroad. We believe that the existing Commonwealth Agency would be brought within a single council set up by statute. The council will be based on a number of autonomous boards with authority to deal with their own budget. The following boards would be established: theatre, music, literary art, visual and plastic art, crafts, film and television, abnormal art. These boards would have substantial independence and authority to make decisions. Indeed, in their own field of responsibility, they would be the major source of initiative in policy and in communication with those involved in the art concerned. We will pass an act for a public learning right. We will review quotas for Australian television, cinema and book production, and encourage a greater application of Australian creative talent in their production. Radio and television will be transferred from the Postmaster General's Department to the Department of Media. Law and order. In a modern society, the enhancement of a nation's leisure and culture is an essential ingredient in that pursuit of happiness, which the American founding fathers were not ashamed to profess as one of man's inalienable right. Life and liberty are the other inalienable right. They enshrine in one of the mankind's noblest expression of human aspiration, the Declaration of the Independence in Australia. For the first time in our history, the shadow, mercifully still only a shadow of political violence looms upon us. Law and order. It is an issue that this election, not only our opponents would have it, the repression of dissent and enforcement of conformity, but the genuine cause of protecting and enhancing the life and liberty of our fellow citizens. I'll be going on a short break now. I'll be back.